Never have I expected to experience trauma. This was in the unlikely environment that I had expected as well. It happened all in, I guess, what I call church. August of 2017, I just realized I had a lot of frenemies. People that I had worked with, ate lunch with, hung out with at one point or another. A whole bunch of things just came crashing down and then just spiraled into groups and groups of people, lying about me, trying to fabricate a narrative that was just outright false. And these came from religious leaders as well. And people connected to them. A whole bunch of baggage really pushed on me that made my, I guess, reactions really negative in the end, where I guess I would describe it as developing a really negative reflex. So my body actually and mind ended up going through a weird stress response that I've never experienced before, till I guess a year later, that there was this skin patch on my wrists, and it happened right after a bad week of sleep. Well, at least at that point, I was on and off with taking biometrics or measurements with my sleep, and I realized that it was just really, I couldn't explain, but it was like, oh wow, something's really wrong in terms of health, in terms of how my body is not recovering. From there on, that was around November of 2018 at that point. From there on, these rashes came, like, sort of spread throughout my entire body at that point. Let alone, I guess I didn't realize it until the strain became large enough, let alone the mental strain that I ended up realizing, and how it was really difficult to control how I reacted to anything that sparked the similar gut feeling of just strong negativity in terms of what people were doing to me. Especially, again, this is in the environment where I did not expect it. Through all of this, a lot of damage was definitely taken. I guess it really hit hard mentally, but then that strain or stress response ended up carrying over to how my body physically was as well. So through it all, I realized that my biggest relief only came from spending time with God, is the easiest way of saying it. From praying to reading the Bible, and then really wanting to understand what it meant. And then the other things that I realized I needed to do was, even though I was consistently working out, consistently eating well, quote unquote, I realized that something has to be done more so in terms of healing, because my skin was breaking up, especially on one of my fingers or hands, where it would feel like it would just have a million paper cuts. It would just break out depending on foods that I had eaten, etc. It made it difficult to work. I use my hands a good amount when I work on people for healthcare related stuff, and it was something that really felt uncontrollable. Like, I did not have a lot of grasp of what could have been done to heal, what could have been done to stop people from attacking me left and right, etc. And I noticed that, okay, funny thing was, actually, I'll take a step back, is that going through more training in healthcare related stuff, I stumbled across methods or approaches of modifying the diet, lifestyle, etc., and which is not necessarily really new to me, but experiencing a huge change on my body was something that made me, or nudged me to really apply it in a way that I might have not done so before. So when it came to addressing what I could do better, or different rather, it had to do with I have to start logging or journaling exactly what I was eating, along with some basic measurements on a day-to-day basis. Specifically taking my HRV reading, heart rate variability readings each morning, and jotting down like, oh, well, what is the change from day to day? And I had been using the Oura Ring the whole time. It definitely was registering with readings in the 20s milliseconds, and I was not getting above 50 for past several years in terms of when it was really heavy. You're talking about 17 through around 2020 almost. Readings were just terrible in terms of recovery. Waking up many times, where in the morning that is, not wanting to wake up, etc. And knowing that, hey, like, something needs to be addressed. Going into this detail of diet, things got controlled a little bit when I addressed the diet even more so, or tried at least. And funny thing was, it wasn't until I stumbled across the concept of carnivore dieting, and where that was actually at the very tail end, right before a dramatic change happened to bring me to another level of healing at that point. But for the most part, doing the standard changes of, trying to get your vegetables in, get your fruits in, eating probiotics, natural sources at least, such as water kefir, avoiding dairy, avoiding a lot of refined foods such as starches and flours, refined sugars, etc. And cooking more or less all my meals, everything home cooked. And realized that, okay, I got better to a certain extent, but it would plateau. Where, like, there were still patches of skin irritations on my body. Every once in a while, I would still have a breakout of how the skin would tear up on me, especially on the hands. I realized, like, okay, am I going to heal? Or is this going to resolve or get better where it wouldn't flare up like this, and so on. And mind you, the whole time I was taking a lot of herbs, which actually made a strong difference, especially noted on early on, where they halted or minimized the progression of the skin progression of, this was specifically eczema, dermatitis. I was also, other things I was taking were a multivitamin by Pure Encapsulations, as well as a fish oil 1-omega by same company, Pure Encapsulations. And throughout all this time, again, like, it helped control the progression of symptoms, but symptoms never fully went away. So it wasn't until, let's say, around the 4-year mark after 2017, where I was pointed to, actually, by one of my younger brothers. He stumbled across the carnivore MD, Paul Saladino, and I took a look at it, and I'm like, it makes sense how, if there are irritants in what you're eating, and especially if your body is already highly stressed and having difficulty recovering, it does make sense that, to really recover, you really need to, one, remove what's bothering you, and know, and then the other thing is know where the sources of these things are bothering you come from. And it makes sense when it was described that, plant substances, especially in areas that aren't meant to be eaten, from a structural standpoint, etc., looking at the design of a plant, that they just contain a lot of defensive chemical compounds. And these chemical compounds are supposed to be somewhat toxic or deterring to its predators, quote unquote. For me, I'm like, okay. I was hesitant, I was very skeptical about cutting out all vegetables at first. So I guess I definitely took a very minimalistic approach to this change first, which was, let's try to get my feet wet, slowly walk into the water, about maybe ankle deep at first, starting by lessening the amount of vegetable intake. So yeah, actually throughout this whole time, especially when I realized, okay, I need to be a little more specific as to what I'm eating, one thing that I did was weigh out exactly how much of every type of food I ate to the 100th of a gram. So I have a food scale at the side of my stove, and I would tear the plate, put on the different food groups or food components, and weigh it out, take a photo, and at the end of the day, would just log all of this if I did not do it during the day, that is. But anyways, with the minimizing of vegetables was the first step that I took. Started seeing that, okay, I was doing okay, like biometrically, I was doing measurements for recovery, and it seemed to be okay. Like, I'm like, I don't know what to expect. And then as time went on, I was more specific to having a higher amount of protein intake as well. Initially, I think I was eating closer to at least three main meals a day, where I was intentionally getting at least 30 grams of protein per meal. And then I eventually decided to see if I could do a mix of having longer stretches of not eating during the day as well. So I decided to just break it up into two main meals. And obviously the protein intake would be at least 50 grams a meal. Eventually, I ended up focusing onto beef intake primarily, and realizing that, okay, as my body changed and healed, I noticed phases where earlier on, certain foods seemed okay. For example, like chicken, salmon seemed okay, and then eventually I ended up getting a pretty bad reaction through the gut, the stomach. I'm like, I'm looking at my food journaling here, a list of stuff, and trying to correlate it to my measurements. And I realized, oh, okay, maybe I should try to cut out this food or that food. And then you experiment, or I experimented. And then it became quite clear when measurements were consistently on the negative with certain foods, and I'm like, okay, those are off the list for now at least. And I would do this repeatedly till I realized, ideally red meat, specifically beef actually, was my best source of intake for my macronutrients, or the bigger components of my diet at least. And specifically, it even broke down even further to grass-fed or high-quality beef. Changes were very evident through biometrics. Eventually, I ended up including more biometrics, such as blood pressure each morning, to further distinctions of sleep metrics. So again, the Oura Ring really did provide a lot of that. And addressing these changes, or observing these changes, along with the measurements, were very helpful. At least it helped steady the progression and gave you more of a informal measurement. So you're not being very, let's say, subjective about, oh, I feel this way this day, I feel this way eating this food, but more so, okay, how does the body actually measure up with specific measurements taken with a tool of some sort? So blood pressure, sleep metrics, recovery readings of HRV were done each day. Towards the time where I ended up coming across further changes in my diet and lifestyle stuff to do in terms of healing, I eventually, just a side note was in the past, I eventually weaned off herbs and supplements. Yeah, it was at one point where I noted that my skin condition improved, to such an extent where it was minimal in terms of what was happening. Flare-up wise, didn't really have much flare-ups at one point, and that's when I decided to start to wean off of the herbs that I was using. So patent herbs in particular, I used herbs. I guess they have this English name from the Chinese original name to describe its function. So one was Skin Wind Clear, by Active Herb, that is. And I was also using Liver Fire Clear, from what I recall. These herb combinations, they affect your body's responses, or how your body works. So one, the Skin Wind Clear in particular, was to address the skin manifestations throughout my body. The Liver Fire Clear was to address the mental strain on my system in particular. And if I remember other ones that I was taking, at times when I did have difficulty sleeping, I also used another one from Active Herb called Brain New. It would help the mind stay calmer to fall asleep better and have better quality sleep. And then I wanted to wean off of the typical supplements, the multivitamin and the fish oil. So I ended up doing that as well at around the same time, I believe. But anyways, moving onwards was I did hit a scenario where there was a weird, high stress response in my body where I could not sleep through the night. So I was waking up multiple times, and until I realized it, I was thinking that, it's me not eating enough. Because I would wake up, and earlier on in that month actually, I was waking up hungry to an extent. But then as I specifically increased the carb intake, I was eating a lot of white rice, or using white rice, as it was one of the few carbs that I was able to tolerate at that time. And I increased it thinking that, okay, I can't be hungry at this point, but I would still wake up each night. However, maybe 1.5 weeks into this change in increasing the carb macronutrient, I noticed that, I'm not hungry, however, I'm still waking up at night. My weight increased significantly. I was close to 20 pounds heavier than I've ever been. I actually hit my heaviest weight at 157 pounds right before I realized, I need to address my body's stress response again. So that's when it dawned on me that I needed to switch up my herbal regimen a little bit again, and I ended up using something called Ease Tonic, which was, in a way you could describe it as a de-stressor, and same herbal company, Active Herb. And within the first day of taking it, actually, that night I was already able to sleep more peacefully, let's say. It was only after the first night that things started to move in the right direction after switching that herbal formula. Even within that week, I already noticed my weight start to drop again, and in the matter of a month or so after the peak weight that I ended up having, within a few weeks or so, upwards of a month, I was able to drop down to the 140s again, and then I eventually, in a couple months, I think, hit close to my ideal weight, around 140 pounds. Anyways, yeah, so that was one thing that I remember quite clearly, because it was another bout of stress that started to build up that I was not expecting again. Yeah, looking through this whole healing process, I guess I would summarize it as realizing that my body is something that I need to learn more about. And I think that is true for every individual, because everyone's different. Besides the fact that the gut microbiome in particular is different for everyone, I'm realizing that took a larger role in terms of how I had to address it in terms of dieting, etc. These past several years have been emotionally traumatizing, or there was that phase of emotional trauma that I I guess I had to learn how to overcome it, but also realize that I had to be humble enough to move forward in terms of not repeating the same things over and over again when I thought I had a solution, when I thought things should have worked, and also being persistent in the right things, realizing that I would not have stumbled or been open to new ways of healing or new ways of addressing my body, new ways of addressing my mental state, if I was not humble enough to learn things that did affect it. Yeah, long story short, after this amount of explaining, I guess a lot of these things that I experienced so far had changed the way I view how the body is to be taken care of, how the mind is to be taken care of, how the soul is to be taken care of through all of this. I guess one thing on the spiritual side had to do with remembering what is true and how that carries your mental state as well. Rehearsing what is true. There's a whole bunch of different stuff really ran through my mind. A lot of the lies, a lot of the harassment, etc. They just pop up in your mind, and if you don't hold on to the right thoughts, they become overwhelming. They become paralyzing. They become oppressive. And I realized you really need to focus on the right things to move forward. So this is just an opening, first vlog that shows a little bit of, I guess, a highlight of my current life, a peak of conflict in what I've experienced so far in life, and learning how, or realizing how that had affected every aspect of my life. Interactions with people, interactions with those at work, interactions with family. I am grateful that a lot has come forth in terms of healing and where I am now. So I am hoping that you guys, whoever hears this, sees this, would be encouraged that there is healing. I think one of the things is to realize or to come across what will actually heal. These moments in life, I guess, really challenge and give an extra view or lens that widens the perspective of things. As we go along, we will show you specifics as to what I ended up doing in terms of, I guess, how I cook or how I end up meal prepping and whatnot, but also other things that I realized that were helpful in terms of lowering the stress response in the body. So we'll go into how I do that as well. I guess we will continue next time, and let me know any thoughts, any questions, comments that you guys may have. Okay, catch you later.